picked a track up, followed it down in, jumped up a forky. Like, oh, that's not him. And get into a spot where it'd been cut probably 15 years before. And it was all spruce and fir, regen, patches of it, that were 8 to 12 feet tall. And in there, you could walk in the softwood. There were no limbs, like the moose and deer had knocked the limbs off. So you could walk through that, but they had taken the overstory out. Yeah. So in those skid roads was all hardwood whips. And I got up in there, and it was buck chasing doe tracks, just like you're saying. And I'm standing there trying to figure out, all right, I got to do a containment loop, figure out what's going on. And I'm standing there thinking, all right, do I go clockwise or counterclockwise? And I hear snap, bang, crash, and grunting, and I said, Jesus, it's right here.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails. I'm your host, Travis Williams. Sitting down today with John Moulton.
Hello.
Johnny says hi. And Mark Head.
Hello.
So, Mark works with me. We've been friends for a real long time. Anybody that's watched some of the... What have we done? We did the moose video together that you're in on. And then you're on that Vermont Tracking Day video. So that's Mark for those of you who have seen those two videos. If you haven't, jump on Northwoods Whitetails and check those out. You can put a face with the voice. So like I said, Mark works with me. We've been good friends, hunt together. And I don't know, what do you want to talk about? Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Where are you from?
Well, I'm Mark Head. I grew up in Snowville, New Hampshire, Eaton, New Hampshire, which is a very small town just outside of Conway. Population of roughly 300. When I was there. Jumped around a little bit in New Hampshire, moved to Tamworth, lived there for a bit, worked for a logging company for 19, 20 years, forest land improvement out of Tamworth. Did that and started getting a little bit older and decided that there was probably a change that I needed to do.
This sounds eerily familiar.
Familiar. So I thought to myself, I said, well, my wife said to me, she goes, well, you're always working on heavy equipment and doing that. Maybe you should think of getting into heavy equipment repair. And I said, no. So I went to the tech school down there in Laconia for boat mechanic, and the rest is history.
Then I recruited you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tried to recruit you from day one, but the stars didn't align.
The logging's great for scouting, but the long-term effects of killing your body over the years.
It's logging it's a lifestyle, not a living.
Yes. Yep.
I'm glad I did it. Like, I love being, I miss being in the woods. I don't necessarily miss the job.
I hear you.
So what is it that, so this is a good opportunity because I was hoping this would organically come up, which obviously it did. What is it that, and I'll ask you first, Mark, what is it about logging? Two-part question. Part number one, what is it about logging that you enjoyed the most? And part two, what is it about logging? Because let's face it, you loggers are spectacular deer hunters. There's a correlation there. I'm not going to ask if, because there's no if. It's a thing. What do you think that correlation is?
The correlation is just, it's being out there, being in nature every day, observing how nature operates and works, and taking that information and using it to your advantage. I mean, you're out there every day seeing how the animals are moving, what they're feeding on, what their habitat is, where they like to be, and all of that.
Yeah, I agree, spot on.
Yeah.
Because it's just all the time out there. You're just picking up little tidbits of information all the time, and you're filing it. And some of it you don't even realize at the time.
Correct.
But down the road, it's like,
I remember that.
Yeah. Creates patterns that you see. And Yeah.
And it's, if you're going to go into the tracking part of it, you know, if you're a logger, you're not averse to hard work.
Right.
And we all know what, to be successful tracking, what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is it that you both, was it just being outside? Was it the connection with nature? Was it both, like, that you enjoyed about log? Because it's hard work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean-
I'm still kind of doing it. I'm running mechanical equipment now, but it's the being out there and seeing. I've never been indoors or not being able to look out a window. That would kill me. You
Right.
know,
Exactly.
It's just, it's in the elements, and yeah, you're working in the crappy weather sometimes, but it's just something about being out there. As a matter of fact, I saw a deer this morning
Right.
on the job. You know, it's everyday thing.
It's the smells, the sounds,
Right.
what goes along with it. It's,
So speaking of smells,
I know where you're going with this.
so Mark used to come over to the house when he was logging. So he lives right across the street from my parents. That's how we met. And I'd say, no wonder you kill big bucks, Mark. You smell like a friggin' tree. Because he's got his green and black flannel there on, and it smells like, he just cut down a tree. And I'm like, personally, I still think I was onto something, because you guys can walk right up to him because you smell like a tree. The rest of us,
Or diesel fuel and hydraulic
Oil.
oil. They're used to it.
which they're used to. Yeah.
If especially you're on a job for
Right.
a big job a long time, I'm telling you, it just happens.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, Mark and I hunt a lot together. And when I say together, we have double teamed a couple bucks, which, man, we've had fun doing that. We'll probably jump into that later. But let's dive into this year's buck story. You killed a nice deer in Maine.
Yeah, Maine.
Let's hear about that. I think it was tracking, right?
Yeah, I was tracking. It was Maine's muzzleloader. We just got, I don't know, it was 8-10 inches of snow, fresh snow that morning, that night, and went to the spot in the morning and went out and cut some tracks that were, dimples in the snow. Followed those around and determined that one of them was one that was worth taking further, and so I did that, and I jumped him up. The first time I jumped him up, I was probably going a little too fast. I know I was going a little too fast. I was following dimples in the snow, trying to make up time, and he was bedded in some softwood along a brook, and I came across his bed, running tracks out of it. And I said, all right, well, now we got a fresh one in front of us.
That's the moment I love right there. Now you're in the game.
You're on him. So I jumped him. I don't remember. I probably jumped him 2 or 3 times, 3 times throughout the day. The second time I jumped him, he was in the same exact spot, bedded. Not the same, but the same setup as the first time. So I said, all right, I think I'm starting to learn something about you, I'm going to, next time this happens, we'll be ready. I'm sneaking through some hemlock softwood, and there's a bunch of snow on everything, those days, and the wind's starting to pick up, and the snow's falling off, and I'm going down this finger ridge down to a brook or a bench because he's been laying on these benches on brook faces, brook edges, and I'm sneaking down there, and I just know that he's bedded here, and I take one step, my right foot hits a log underneath the snow, comes out from underneath me. I start going backwards, probably 20 yards from me. He jumps up out of his bed. Uh-oh. It was all waist deep, regeneration. He took off running. I'm trying to get a bead on him, falling backwards, and that was the end of that. He took off. So I ended up getting back on his tracks, following him. He got tangled up with some does down by the brook. And I saw the couple of deer flag. Wasn't sure if he was in that group. Went down, saw his tracks. Saw where they were looping back up around this ridge. And I said, well, I'll just make a beeline in that direction, kind of cut them off. So I did that and started tracking them, picked their tracks back up, made some time on them. And he was bedded, more standing, probably 40 yards from me. I don't know if he was bedded. I could just see white of his belly, deer belly and broadside to me. And I'm looking. At this point, it's probably 1:30 in the afternoon. And the wind's starting to pick up and the snow's falling out of the trees. And I can't see antlers on this deer. And I'm 99% positive this is him, Yep. And he moves his head just enough, and the snow is sticking to his antlers. So I could only see part of his antlers, partial antlers, as he moved his head. And I said, well, that's him. And pulled the muzzleloader up, Woodman. Right behind the front shoulder, right where you want to shoot him, there was a 6-inch maple tree. And I said, well, if I go back a little bit, we're going to be too far back past the ribs. I said, we'll just go for a high shoulder shot. A high shoulder shot it was. He just dropped in his tracks right there, done.
Yep. That usually does that.
Yeah.
Love it when that works out. So how far do you think you tracked him from when you picked him up to when you shot him?
3, 4, maybe 5 miles.
Yeah.
Tops.
And that was it was the very last week
Yeah.
of the
Maine.
Because I think I killed mine
Yours is like a day or two after.
a day or two after.
Yeah.
Man, we got some snow for that late season muzzleloader. We got a camp booked up there, which Moulton, you got to come. 5 weeks. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 this year. So we should be able to find, hopefully between, those dates we'll get some snow and be able to get after them.
Something will happen.
Yeah.
Something will happen.
And I'll take a little video here of the buck. It was a real nice deer. In typical Mark fashion, he sends me a picture of it, and it's like you can barely see the rack. And I don't know, it's probably 2 months later, where he comes in. Hey, I got my deer rack in the car. And he brings it. I'm like, well, what one was that? And he's like, that's one I shot this year. I'm like, what? It's a nice one. I mean, I don't know. You're the scorer. What do you think that is? 100-inch deer?
I'd say it's more than that. I'd say it's like 105, maybe.
It's a nice deer. Again, we don't hunt for the size of the antlers. We hunt for the hunt and
Experience.
the
Memories.
experience. And that was but let's face it. I'm not going to begrudge anybody for wanting to shoot a big buck. I do too, but it's not why we do it. We do it for the journey, not the destination. So, but that was a good hunt, man.
Yeah. Any day you can get a good buck tracking is a good day.
Sure.
He weighed 165.
Nice deer.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially that late.
That
I mean,
late.
you think about I'd love to weigh a buck, catch a buck, right? Weigh him in October, collar him, and then capture that same deer late season after they're all rutted out. You know what I think too
Second, third week of December.
they get dehydrated. I might have said this in the last podcast I did with Kevin, but I mean, you think about they just run around and they don't feed. They don't. I mean, how many times have you been tracking a buck where they stop and drink?
Yeah.
I mean, they cross those little brooks and maybe they could have stopped, but usually they're striding right over. You know what I mean? They're not. You can kind of tell how they slow. They shorten their steps up and they're.
Yeah. Yeah.
So John, you killed a buck this year too.
I did. I had I killed a small buck here in New Hampshire, but I missed a really nice buck in Maine. That one stung a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I might have seen the footage of that.
Yeah. So that was Thanksgiving week up in Maine. And I'm trying to think. I think I got up there on a Sunday. Monday, I think we got a little bit of snow. All right, they had snow on the ground, and it went out Monday. And I went in a different area than I usually go. There was some logging going on, and I was trying to get away from some other people. And I had been to this spot a couple of years before. So I drove down there and checked this spot out and drove up on this land, and I said, I'm just going to park here and going to make a day of it and just go out there and see what I can find. And I don't know, I was out of the truck maybe 150, 200 yards that first day, and there's some deer tracks. There's a doe and a fawn working through a cut, crossed a brook, and I said, hey, there's a buck track. It wasn't nothing huge, and I started following it, and it was like a day old, but I'll take those tracks sometime just to see where they bring me and stuff. So I worked through this cut, and I made it about halfway up through that cut, and started to see more tracks mingling through. There'd been a few deer in the last day in that cut. It wasn't like a clear cut. They'd left some patches in there, and it wasn't wide open. And I got about halfway up through that cut, and I could hear a deer blowing. And I said, geez, I've got the wind. The wind was kind of quartering to me. I said, that deer didn't smell me. It might have saw me, but that deer was blowing quite a bit. I heard it take off. And so I just waited a few minutes and let things settle down. And then I kind of just went the direction that deer was blowing. Well, I got about halfway up this ridge, and there's a pretty good lynx track crossing there. And I said, geez, that's cool. And I'm mingling through these tracks, and there was enough tracks that they were going every which direction. And I said, well, there's some chasing going on, and it's been going on. So it was one of those spots where it's like, okay, I'm just kind of going in a direction. I'm not really following a track because they're every which direction. And I'm just poking real slow. And I don't know, within 10, 15 minutes, I'd move a little bit and stop, and I heard something, and then I could distinctly hear a deer coming, and this doe come out of some thick stuff on the edge of that cut and went by me at like 10 feet. And she stopped behind a fir tree here, and I'm like, I had the GoPro running at the time, and I'm like, and she took off, and I'm just waiting. I said, there's gonna be a buck here. I just had a feeling. Well, here comes another deer, and it's another doe. And then I heard a grunt. And I said, he's behind that second doe. And the doe peeled and cut to my right. And I said, well, that buck's going to do the same thing. Here he comes. And I can just see bits and pieces of him loping down through there. And I don't know what it is, but the older I get, I don't shoot as much as I used to shoot. I used to spray a lot of bullets out there. I don't do that so much now. It's like, I don't know, I'm more patient, which is not always good, but I'm blatting at him, and he slows right down to almost a stop, and then he's turning to go towards with it. And there's a lot of little maple whips and stuff, and I had him in the scope, and I sent it. And he took off, and he didn't really react, and I'm like, geez, I thought I had the deer. Well, long story short is I missed. It just didn't. I don't think it made it there. I found a couple saplings that were cut. It doesn't take much.
Right.
And but I spent the rest of the day on his track, and he went for quite a long ways, and he bumped those does a few more times, and then he just boogered right out of there. And never caught up with him, but I did see a couple more does that day. But it stung a little bit. It was I can't tell you exactly what it was, but it was a rack buck.
Yeah.
It was a nice one. And that shot was probably, I think it was like 15 yards, something like that.
Well, I'm sitting down here with some really good marksmen, number one, and we'll get to that in a second. But you said something there that made me think of something. Remember the buck? I called him the freak when we were in Maine. So my dad had seen this deer like 2 or 3 days prior, and my dad's killed some really big bucks. He's like when he says he saw a big one, it's just like you just said, it was a rack buck. You've seen a rack buck. Sometimes you see somebody in the woods or a friend that, hey, I saw one cross the road. It was a big. Oh yeah, it was a big one. Then they show you a picture and it's a basket rack 8. Everybody's interpretation is different. So that's why I point that out, because my dad's seen big bucks. And he described it as like baseball bats at the end, the beams. Well, like 3 days later, and I'm probably 3 miles from there, here comes this buck down through. I'd bare ground hunting. I mean, it was just trash with a buck chasing a doe. As a matter of fact, Mark, you'd hunted that up on that ridge, up above the road the day before. And actually, I'd hit the road. It'd gotten late, and I'm like, you know what? I got like a half an hour. I'm going to run down in here and just kind of cruise, parallel the road. I got to walk back to the truck anyway. Might as well walk back in the woods. And I get down in there, and I mean, I could smell him. He just hooked a tree. I'm like, this buck was just right here, he was. And long story short, it's starting to snow a little bit, and it's getting, it's just, you got maybe a half hour left of legal shooting light, and I hear crunch, crunch. And I barely heard him, but it's because it was kind of that wet leaves. And I look left to right, and here comes just this block of a deer with this just mass immediately. And I stop looking at the rack immediately. And I pull up, and it's thick. And he's going down like a little knob. And I'm like, I got one window here, and it's right, boom, now. And I get over there, I could smell him, and I looked, and, it snowed, and we get back to camp, and I'm fit to be tied, who I just did the podcast with, Kevin Harrison. I called him. Mark was there. I'm like, I needed people to talk me off the ledge, because I'm like, did I just miss the biggest buck of my life? Which I might have. But Mark's like, listen, this is what we have to do. We got to go back there in the morning, and I want you to stand right where you shot, and where I'm going to stand where you think the deer was, and then travel towards me and look for spoor, anything that looks like
broken branches.
Right. Yeah. And am I glad I did that? Because it throws your confidence. Like, you're like, you're doing the woulda, shoulda, couldas. Should I waited? And having gone back there, number one, we found the broken branch. And I mean, you could literally see where that bullet hit, and then you could see where it deflected it down low, and where it broke a tree about this big, and it landed in between the deer's legs.
Wow.
I mean, literally, it was like you could almost see the bullet's trajectory on what it hit. And it also told me that if I didn't take that shot that I took based on where the deer was, and that was it. That's what I had.
Well, it also gives you peace of mind. You didn't wound the animal. You know what I mean?
100%.
That's what sets heavy on your mind.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
I had a shot, that buck I missed, I had a shot before that, and I waited because he was coming almost directly at me.
Right.
I had a 45-yard shot, but I said, "Oh, he's keep coming," and that too close can be bad too.
I had 21. Very similar scenario happened to me up at camp. Picked a track up, followed it down in, jumped up a forky. Was like, oh, that's not him, and get into a spot where it'd been cut probably 15 years before, and it was all spruce and fir regen patches of it, that were 8 to 12 feet tall. And in there, you could walk in the softwood. There were no limbs, like the moose and deer had knocked the limbs off. So you could walk through that, but they had taken the overstory out. Yeah. So in those skid roads was all hardwood whips. And I got up in there, and it was buck chasing doe tracks, just like you're saying. And I'm standing there trying to figure out, all right, I got to do a containment loop, figure out what's going on. And I'm standing there thinking, all right, do I go clockwise or counterclockwise? And I hear snap, bang, crash, and grunting, and I said, Jesus, it's right here. And I look 15, 20 yards away, 30 yards away. Here comes the doe running down through there, skipper behind her, and this rack buck behind the both of them, grunting away. Yeah. I was running my 760 with a peep sight then. It was because it was bad weather. And I'm not much for emptying a gun. I emptied the gun. And didn't even touch him.
You pulled a Travis.
Yeah. It was kind of embarrassing, but
yeah, I don't get embarrassed. It is what it is. You hunt where we hunt, now we hunt.
Yeah, so
it's going to happen.
And it does happen, and you shoot and you miss, and you get back on them and track them, and you get an education.
Yeah.
That deer, he got to the main truck road. You could see where he slowed up, paralleled the truck road for a couple 100 yards, turned 90 degrees, and was all out, wide open, across the road and 100 yards beyond it. He didn't have a clue I was behind him. And then he went up this ridge. And this is this was my opportunity to get him, and I messed it up. He was going up this ridge, and his tracks got tighter, and he was slowing down, and he got to the top, fed, backtracked, bedded on his backtrack, and I was steaming because I was thinking in my head, I just watched him go full bore for 200 yards. Like, I need to make up time. And I knew when his stride got shorter, I needed to slow down, but I didn't do it. So that was costly. And it's, it's those things that you should have done, and you look back on it and you're like, well, that I should have done differently, and I knew better. But I chased that deer till dark that day.
So, John, I don't know when it was. It was fall, maybe? Summer? When did you come over? We did the little 22.
It was summer, fall, yeah.
Yeah. So Mark does a lot of silhouette shooting. Actually, he used to run silhouette tournaments. And so he's like, this is good. It's good for muscle memory and shooting and stuff. He's like, we got to do it more. And we do have to do it more.
We do.
And we had a friggin' blast. He came over with his 22 with a scope. We shot offhand. And in the first round, I was holding my own. I'm like, I think he was just.
I might have been sandbagging.
I think he was letting me, He's like, I'll just. And actually, I think I shot a little bit at the beginning. But anyway, we had a blast. So we should do that more. Like we shoot.
Yeah.
Because both of you guys, are.
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I used to shoot all the time. I grew up shooting with my dad, and it was cheap.
Right.
People aren't shooting rifles like they used to because you can't go out and waste $30, $40 a box.
Right.
$50, $60 a box.
Well, yeah, depending on what you shoot.
Right.
But you just think about it. I used to think nothing of wasting 2 or 3 boxes of shells on a weekend, but the average guy doesn't want to do that now because it's ridiculous.
Well, and I do all my own loads. I do all my own hand loading. So trying to find components for some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Since COVID has been a struggle in itself,
But like you said, even shooting a 22, the mechanics, the muscle memory, it's all the same. We all have to be shooting to be proficient.
Right.
So you take advantage of those opportunities when they come. I'm definitely guilty the last few years of not shooting enough, and we need to do that. You got the spot.
Yeah, right here. We shoot off the porch.
So my setup, my off-season setup, I'll call it, I guess, is a CZ 457 or something. I think it is bolt action. It's a lot of 22s are kind of a youth size. Mm-hmm. This is full-size rifle. Got it set up with a 3-9 scope, 2-7, I can't remember, but it's very similar to my deer rifle.
Yeah.
Which is a Remington 700 mountain rifle, and they feel the same. So it's just a cheaper way to go about it.
Lot cheaper.
Trav needs to find himself one of them old Remington pumps and 22.
I've been looking on Gunbroker, and I'm horrible. Like at the internets. I go on Gunbroker. I'm like, I don't even understand how this works, and like the bids here, and I don't want to get in a bid war, so I just. Like, I get into it for a minute, and then I get out of it. I need to just buckle down and get one because I would really like to get more proficient with a peep sight. I love how they carry. I've got that 7600 in there. I've got a 760 rifle that I could bring up to Kevin a coin and have him cut down. Shout out to Kevin. He's awesome. TCG Creations? TGI Creations. He cut down that 7600 for me, and it's what I killed the 8-pointer with my dad when we chased it down there. There's a video on that in Northwoods. Actually, that mount is done at my taxidermist, and if it wasn't here doing this podcast, I'd probably be up there picking up my mount. But I've waited 2 years. I think I can wait a few more days.
Yeah.
But I just want to get. Like, I feel like when I pull the gun up, like, to my shoulder, it's just not – I got to, like, fiddle to get it right in that aperture, right where I want it to be. And to me, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's muscle memory and sight picture.
Yeah.
And
just getting that.
And I also say I'm 46. Don't recreate the – you've killed a lot of bucks with a scope. Other than the Vermont buck that I missed last year, which I don't know if I've told that story on the podcast before, but there'll be a time and a place. But that one – I felt really good and missed. But aside from that, typically if I got a couple, you guys know me, I like to shoot. If I get a couple of shots, I'm going to get one into them. So I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't reinvent the wheel. But nonetheless, it's not a bad idea to shoot more.
No.
And as you just said, John, like right here in my backyard, I've got, I don't have 100 yards, but it's like 80.
80, I'd say, yeah.
And we should just do it more,
Yep, we should.
I got those little 1/5 scale swinger targets there.
Yeah, those are great, especially when you're plinking with a 22.
What do you think? It's when a season, you define a season by what? A couple, 1-2 opportunities.
You
maybe?
nailed it.
Exactly.
So if you muff it,
that's it. You're done.
you're done.
And that's when I just think about it over and over again when I'm like that Vermont deer. Like it's like all the effort, the time off of work, the getting everything in line, the family, the sacrifices. Here's your moment, and you're not going to execute it because you didn't practice a little bit. Like that's why I think it's very important, which I practice, but I don't practice as much as I should. It's like in the video there from the 8-pointer when I'm walking up the hill calling myself fat. Like it's your responsibility. If this is what you're passionate about, it's your responsibility to enter the game prepared.
Right.
And when you're out of shape, you don't track the same. When that buck turns and goes up that mountain, if you're thinking about it, if you're even a little bit thinking about, oh man,
Hesitating, yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
When you turn and motor up that 3,000 footer and look back down, I'm like, that seemed pretty steep. That's when you're ready to go.
Right.
And I try to enter my season like that and try and at least have some sort of I just want to be confident, which I feel like I am, but not with a peep sight. So that's what I got to work on.
I used to love a peep. I've got a peep gun too. I don't use it as much.
Yeah.
Because I've got my first pair of glasses here in the last 6 months, and it changes everything for me.
I've noticed.
It
going downhill as well.
Well, I've needed the readers for a few years now, and now I'm starting to lose. I used to have really good eyesight, but now that I got glasses, I'm like, wow, I can see better. So, I don't know. I still think a peep is okay up close tracking stuff.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm just saying there's a time and a place. I love scopes.
Yeah.
I really do. But there's a time and a place depending on, there's never the perfect scenario,
Nope.
If you're tracking through the thick stuff and all of a sudden you're in the wide open and he's out there 150 yards,
Right. One of the things that I struggle with a peep versus a scope, and I talked about it in the video, literally, of the 8 in 2021, is several times I could see the buck bedded, but I could not see his head. And I feel like with a scope, I've been in that same scenario, and I crank it up. I run a 2-7 on most of my rifles. I'll crank it up to a 7, and if you just do this, you can catch it. You can see enough. Yep, that's him. Boom. Yeah. Whereas with a peep, if you're going to do that, you got to unzip your jacket if you've got binos.
Right.
Pull your binos up, and then it's hard because you're jacked up, you're shaking, you can't see. You know what I mean? And then
it's like Mark talked about the buck earlier. He couldn't see antlers until it moved. Mm-hmm. How many times have we been looking at a deer and never saw antlers until
they moved?
He moved just right, or if it was sunlight or something caught it.
Yep.
We've all been in that situation.
Yeah.
Yep. So last year you killed the buck, right? Mm-hmm. Or 2 bucks?
No, last year was just 1.
Oh, sorry, year before.
I did 2.
You got 2. Tell us your favorite hunt from that year.
That would,
because you shot a little one, right? Just like a 136 incher.
No, not that one.
What year was that one?
That was the year before.
Oh, can't keep track.
How many years we got going now?
Sorry. Listen, we talked about this at work the other day. Like Mark and I enjoy hunting for the hunt, which I think we'll probably dive into later. But he's a killer. He's killed a lot of big bucks. Like literally, when I was talking to you about coming over, John Moulton, I'm like, John, you want to come over? Mark's coming over, and I know, you guys know each other because we're kind of in the same circle of friends here, and we talk. And But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, he killed this one was like 146 inches. He killed this one was 100, and then he killed, I'm like, wow, he's actually killed more big bucks than I remember. Maybe
He's killed some good ones because I didn't really know until you started showing me pictures of bucks that he killed.
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's mental. I think I like block. It's like kind of like when your wife asks you to do something, you don't really hear it. So when he tells me he killed another big buck, I don't want to hear it. So no.
I just try to stay fly under the wire. You know?
Yeah.
22 was I got one in Maine, one in New Hampshire, and then we were over in Vermont.
Yes, that was the year.
Yeah. The one I got in New Hampshire was probably might have been one of the biggest 6-pointers potentially ever.
That was a giant.
But he ended up.
I'll try and put a picture up if I can find it because I have one on my phone.
He ended up being a 5-pointer. One of his that G2 was snapped clean off at the base.
I mean, his G2 was what?
I think it had to have been 10, 12 inches.
Yeah, crazy. Cool buck.
But that was a pretty cool story. Sneaking around some dried up beaver bogs and swale grass, bare ground. I don't know. It was second week, New Hampshire's rifle season, maybe. Things were just starting to heat up, and sneaking up to the edge of this beaver bog along the edge, and there goes a deer out into it. And I said, that just happened to look an awful lot like a buck, and it didn't blow at me. He just got out of dodge. And I said, I don't think he went very far. So I pulled out the grunt tube and got behind some softwood trees and started grunting, kicking leaves, making a racket, basically. And I saw a glimpse of him out in the swale grass quickly, and then he looped back around and popped back into the woods probably 40 yards from me, and he had his head down and he was looking to fight, but he lost this one. It looked like he'd been winning a couple too, but he didn't win the one with me.
Because he was pretty busted up.
Yeah, I think
He's a fighter, huh?
yeah.
Wicked rack.
It was, and it was cool for that experience. Will it ever happen again? I don't know. He was just that deer's personality. He was aggressive, and I happened to do the right things to make him angry, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that one was 170, 175 dressed.
And then you killed one in Maine.
Yep.
Is that one of the ones you have here?
That's
that
smaller
guy.
one.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's the reason why we hunt right there. That little guy. That was, it was an interesting story. I went behind some closed gates, paper company land, and got up into a couple miles out. Thought I owned the place. Thought I was the only one out there. Went up one ridge, down, got in some tracks, down on a brook valley, went up another high ridge, saw some moose, was coming back down, following some tracks, some older tracks. Bumped into a gentleman there that had taken an e-bike in, an older gentleman. He goes, "Did you see those deer?" I'm like, "What deer?" I didn't see any deer. He's like, "I just jumped like 3 or 4. They went right where you came from." I was like, "Really?" I never even saw him. So I asked him, I said, "Well, you going to go after him?" He said, "No, I got a bad knee or something. I can't." I was like, "Do you mind if I go after him?" And he's like, "Absolutely not." And I said to him, I said, "If you want to go get them, they're all yours. Like, I'll go somewhere else."
But I'm going to go poke around and see what's over there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and he was cool. He was like, "No, there's no way I can catch up to him or do any of that." So I said, "All right, well, I'll tell you what. I'm either going to run this thing till it gets dark or kill it." So I chased him around all day, got to about 3:30, and I was, 3,200 feet up on the side of this mountain. And he was headed over the backside.
So when you say so you got over there, and it was
it was definitely a buck. It was bigger than that one.
Big buck track?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was he on, was the other two does, or?
Yeah, and the does took off, and he
Gotcha.
headed up the mountain.
So he's got you up at 3,200 feet headed.
At 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I'd been on him for most of the day. And I said, well, I guess he's going to win this one because I got like 4.5 miles back to the truck. And I said, well, I'll just poke slowly down through these hardwood shelves and maybe I'll get lucky. And I went about a half mile and there that one was, just kind of meandering across one of those shelves. And I said, you're going to do. This is on my terms at this point.
Yep.
So I shot twice, got him, dressed him out, dragged him half a mile probably, I'm guessing, down to a tote road. And I was hunting with my buddy John, and there's no way I can get this deer drug out before he's going to wonder where I am or what's going on. So I hoofed it back to his truck, which was an hour hike as fast as I could go. Got there. It was just getting dark. And he goes, where you been? What's going on? And I took the empty shell cases, put them on his tailgate, and I said, we got to go recover those bullets.
I like it.
That's awesome.
And we put on headlamps, got out there, and, you know, he's like, oh, geez, there's a long ways to get out. I said, John, we've got all night to do this.
Yep.
If we get this deer out at midnight, it's out at midnight. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So we hooked him up, and we're dragging him out, and we had a great time. You know, it's what it's about, you know.
So I could be wrong, but I have a theory about this, that we love and remember the ones that we had to work harder for.
Exactly.
There's something about it. The ones that I had to go back in and get help, and it was half the night, or it just seems like those are the ones that just stick with you.
The suffrage.
Yeah.
The suffrage. It's not the size of the animal, it's the size of the hunt.
Yeah.
Just think about that for a second, because like what he just described, we're looking at this buck, which I'll take a picture of and maybe some video. And listen, I don't apologize for any deer we've ever shot, but that's a beautiful buck on a beautiful mountain with just a wonderful hunt. And I will take that. So this is what I often tell family, friends. You know, part of the reason that I think platforms like Northwoods are so important is that it is showing hunters that there's another way. Not that there's anything wrong. If you live in the Midwest, you can't hunt how we hunt, which is what makes what we have so
special. Yeah.
So special. Because, you know, if you're hunting on a lease or something like that, and you know that buck walks by, you're probably not going to shoot it if you know there's a bigger one, because you want to shoot a bigger buck, which is completely understandable.
If you're on a lease, you might not even be allowed to shoot that one.
A whole nother conversation.
Right. Yeah.
But where we hunt and how we hunt, it's about the hunt. And yeah, you know, maybe he didn't shoot that one, he would have shot a bigger one, and maybe he wouldn't gotten one at all. But it's about the experience and the camaraderie that he has with his friend. And I think us showing that as, you know, I hate all these terms, content creators, whatever the heck we're called. All we're doing is doing what we do and showing it to you. So I think that's a good description, right?
Right.
But we're showing you what we do. And I want people to know that it's okay not to be a trophy hunter, quote unquote trophy, because that is a trophy in my mind. You know, and while on this point, and again, you're always going to have haters. You know, you're putting yourself out there. You know, we show these videos and I read the comments, good and bad. And, you know, some people have said, like in my New Hampshire video this year, they're like, you know, it seemed like you were disappointed. I wish to God that I could convey my excitement. I was telling Mark earlier, like I ran up, my dad came out of the woods, and I dragged the buck out, you know, through two brooks, about a mile. It was a bad drag, but it was fun. Loved every moment of it. I filmed it, you know. And I told my dad what it was when I killed him, you know. And I drove up this side road. My dad comes out, and he's telling me about his hunt real quick, and I just ran up and hugged him. And he kind of gave me a look like, that buck's bigger than you said it is, isn't it? I'm like, no, it's just so awesome. Like I got in there and I knew he was in there and I found his track and, you know, I ended up shooting him at 25 yards. So I love that story. Thanks for sharing it. Like that's what it's all about.
So there's, I don't remember if you even remember, I don't know. It's probably 2008, 9, 10. No, it couldn't have been 10 because I shot a good one then. One of those years, I shot a fork horn I was with George and shot this forkhorn the last weekend of it was like the last Saturday of the season. I had snuck up, followed that deer, tracked it, and got to within 15, 20 feet. It was sound asleep.
Yes.
You know exactly where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It was sound asleep. I watched it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to give you a sporting chance. When you get up, I'm going to be ready, and I'm going to shoot. And he got to his feet, took off. Like, he didn't have a clue I was there. I got the deer. I drug it out. I don't remember I called you or you called me and asked if I got one. And I said yes, but it's nothing special. George heard me say that and came unglued. He was like, I don't want to hear you ever say that again. Like, don't ever say that, it was not special or anything like that. And that for me was a turning point.
Amen.
Which I was just like, you are 110% right. Like that, they're all special. Like it wasn't, it wasn't a 140-inch deer, but the hunt was there. How many people can walk up and watch one sleep for 3, 4, 5 minutes and then
and you're hunting on your terms, right? And
that's where growth comes in over the years,
And the older I get too, the more that I never didn't. I just think as you get older, you have a family. Like last night, I made. Shout out to Hal. I made meatloaf sandwiches. Actually, it's not Hal; it's his wife. I don't remember his wife's name, but we eat venison 4 out of 7 nights a week. Like we eat venison. My wife loves it. My baby girl Adelina loves it. It's that connection. It's the camaraderie when you're up at camp.
Right.
The stories you tell when you get back. It's that full circle in what we have and how we can do it in this region. Whether it's the Adirondacks, whether it's Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, it's super special. And that's why I think it's important for us to tell the right story.
Right.
And to do it what I call the right way.